Fantahzee, Hordes and Heroes. This is a game that I picked up at Gen Con 2016. It is a card and dice game with a fantasy theme, of course, and with a dice rolling and re-rolling mechanics that is reminiscent of the game Yahtzee, and you can see the reference here. On the other hand, well, I don't have a problem with that because game mechanics cannot be copyrighted. There isn't a copyright on those, and so many other games have used that mechanics. I don't have a problem with games, borrowing from one another. Here it's even a knowledge, so no big deal. And games that I like very much, such as Elder Sign, for example, have used similar mechanics. Here we have the roll dice, re-roll, and form sets to use abilities idea that you have in Elder Sign. It is done in a fantasy contest that is more humorous than, say, in Elder Sign, but it remains pretty simple. You will deploy your heroes and to send them against that horde of monsters, and then you will roll dice to activate the abilities of your heroes. Speaking about the monsters are divided in 5 stacks that are threatening that village, which is represented by this stack of cards here. And at the end of each round, after you have attacked the monsters, if there is a monster on top of this stack here, the closest to the village, then a card from the village is destroyed and you have to take it, and that represents a penalty that you have to face. Then we have the monsters themselves. 5 stacks, you shuffle them in a specific way because each deck, well, there's a card face up on top of it which represents the monster that is available at the present time, but then each deck is shuffled in 2 halves separately. You have some basic monsters that you shuffle separately and you put on top, and then you have some advanced monsters that you put at the bottom. And in the bottom half, you also have a boss monster, a big boss for each stack. So you will go through the deck, destroying monsters one after the other, and creating and going towards the boss. Monsters have a combat value here, they have a victory point value, they may have a treasure, so when you defeat them you get a card from the treasure deck. They may also have other abilities, for example the ambush ability that they use to attack you at the end of your turn, or the counter attack ability which they use to fight against you or to hit you, to damage you if you attack them. Then we have our heroes. Heroes and other resources that the players use come out of this stack here, which contains heroes and actions. Heroes have a number of health points. They may have specific abilities, but they at least have a combat ability. And they have symbols here that represent the dice, the number of dice and the type of dice that the player needs to roll. The X pretty much means any number, but when you have multiple X's, it means a pair of that number. Any 2 1s, any 2 2s, any 2 3s would do to activate this card here. Also, some cards can produce or be activated by Steam. Steam is a resource, so to activate your cards, your heroes, you will use dice and or Steam. For example, this guy can be activated with 2 points of Steam or with 3 dice with the same symbol, and it's a fairly heavy hitter. And how do you activate those with Steam? Well, you get game effects such as this one that says get 4 Steam this turn, so pretty clear what you should do if you have this combination here. Other characters' abilities also produce steam. For example, this guy gives you some combat ability and also produces steam when you activate him. So this is the basic idea, and then you have other abilities of other heroes that will activate other heroes, and you can try to chain activations of one another. Some big, really cool, sort of like steampunk constructs. And then you have special abilities or actions. I think that's the technical term. Actions, pretty much, these are cards that grant you specific abilities, specific actions, and they simply you simply do what the text says and you activate the corresponding ability, you receive the corresponding benefit, such as this card. Now, during your turn, at the beginning of your turn, you will have a hand of cards, of course, and you can play up to 4 cards. That is, up to 2 heroes that you deploy in your play area, say I'm gonna deploy these two guys, and then up to 2 actions that you will also place in your area, hoping that you will need them, but planning to use them. For example, say I want to do that, I want to do that action. No, I don't even know if it makes sense right now, but maybe I'll use also this other action here. So you have to commit to the actions that you're performing that turn. As for the heroes, they stay there. If they survive, then later on, next turn and following turns, you will add more heroes. You will deploy more heroes by them unless they're killed in action. Once you have deployed your cards, heroes and or actions, up to 2 per type, you roll 5 dice. And like in so many other games of this type, then you get 2 optional rerolls, and you can reroll any and all of your dice. You can roll on your second reroll. You can roll dice that you did not reroll originally. So you got a lot of flexibility. Once you have rolled your dice, you assign them to your cards to activate your units. Suppose, for example, I decide to do this, and then I decide to activate that guy. And then, for example, I want to activate one of these 2 people. I want to activate that guy, but I don't have the right die because it takes a 2 to activate that guy. I activated this guy and gives me the ability of giving me shield, which is useful defense, and some steam, not particularly useful in this context. But this one that I activated allows me to choose a hero, and they cost 1 less X to activate this turn. So 1 less die. So here I have 2 heroes that only activate with a dice. I could use, for example, that to activate this guy here. And I decide to use my ability from this guy to activate that guy. So I have these 3 heroes, and now I can use them to attack. I total together their combat strength, which in this case is 7, and I simply use that to destroy those monsters. That is to match the health that they have. And I can split in different groups. For example, with 7 hit points, I could destroy those 2 monsters that have 3 and 3. I could destroy this monster here and waste my other point. I could destroy this monster here and waste 2 of my other points. Oh, if I had 8, it would be great, because we could get that guy and that guy. Remember, all other things being equal, you should give priority to the deck all the way to the right, because it is the one that will trigger penalties if the monster is still there after you act. I suppose that I want to destroy these 2 slimes. After you pick up the cards from combat, you need to remove from your pool of heroes a number of hit points, of health points, equal to the counterattack value of the monsters that you defeated. In this case, I don't have counterattack, so no problem. Suppose that I had defeated this character here, has a counterattack of 3. I would need to remove 3 points. So remove heroes until I have removed 3 points of health. In this case, for example, I would remove this one, say, that has 3. That would be okay. After I resolve the counterattack and gain potential treasure, that would be not the case. Treasure, again, is special abilities and benefits, as you can imagine, that come out of that attack. After I have attacked and resolved counterattack, I replenish the horde, and then I look for ambush effects. Ambush effects, we have one here, we have an ambush, and again, I need to kill heroes until I have paid for that penalty. I need to pay at least 1 ambush point. This guy is 2, that would be enough. I would remove that from my I would remove this card from my pool of heroes. At the end, I draw 4 cards. That's a lot of cards. And then I discard down to 5, which is your hand of cards. My turn is over, goes to the next player who does the same thing. Deploys cards, rolls dice, applies effects, tries to get monsters, resolve effects coming from that, replenishes hand, and that would be the next player's turn. You continue like this until 3 of the bosses that are in the deck have been destroyed. At the point the game is over, and you count victory points that are generated by the monsters that you have in your victory pile that you destroy during the game, and the player with the highest total is the winner of the game. So, what do I think of Fantahzee? Well, it is light, it is simple, and that goes to its credit. That is good stuff. On the other hand, sometimes I feel that it's both a little too simple, and yet at the same time, it has some ambitions of games that are less simple and therefore achieve more. That is to say, it has the complexity of a filler, but it runs a little long for a filler. It just, and I don't know if it runs long or it kind of like feels a little bit long because of the fact that the nature of the game is pretty repetitive. Now, it may be that we have been spoiled by games with a strong narrative these last couple of years, so we have come to expect that a game that has a theme will tell us a story. But games that tell some sort of stories or that has some sort of narrative arc, if nothing else, they have a structural arc too. That means that the different phases of the game feel different. That means that there is a build up to a big conclusion. There is an organic sense of development. Here you may say that something like this happens because the top of the decks contains monsters that are not as tough as the ones at the bottom. But ultimately, the game feels pretty repetitive. It just feels like you're throwing your heroes against those monsters, and that's it. And many times they get destroyed, many other times do not. I like the idea of heroes that die. In a recent review, I reviewed positively the others 7 scenes because I like the fact that the heroes died. It adds a sense of drama. But here it happens so often. You do not have time to get attached to the heroes. The heroes do not level up. The heroes, they get treasures from time to time, but they do not really amount to characters. They do not feel like characters. They come, they go, they come, they go. And again, not every game has to have characters, but here you have a game that it presents itself as a blend of abstract mechanics and some fantasy theme, but the fantasy theme, or to say any theme, really is not there. And it's not so much because of the rules that are simple and abstract, but simply because of the repetition, because of the quick series of turns, a string of turns that all feel the same, with slightly different heroes, with slightly different monsters, but without really having any occurrence that punctuates it, that makes special encounter feels special, that makes, whoa, I built up this powerful party and now I can attack the powerful monster. Like you have, for example, in Thunderstone. It just feels very flat. Again, there is a direction overall because at the end, if you're lucky, your party will be better. But it just happens through so many turns in which you just feel that you're going through the cards over and over again, that you are, pick up cards, destroy heroes, pick up cards, destroy heroes, destroy all those monsters. Alas, it feels very repetitive and just there isn't much of a sense of a growing tension. And again, it's not that it's a long game per se, just that because it has such a fairly straightforward line, it just feels a little longer than probably it is, or probably it should. And I can think of other games with the same idea at the core, same mechanics, roll the dice, re-roll, assign them, that have much more engaging arcs, that have much more engaging narratives, or in any case, structure. Again, Elder Sign is the first comparison that comes to mind. Elder Sign has such a strong theme, it has such interesting mechanics that really work well with the theme, and really work to create a narrative, in any case, to create a flow of gameplay that has variety in it, which this one doesn't. So I just, if I am with friends that are gaming experts, or they're committed to board gaming enough that they can play Elder Sign, which is not super gateway, it's not hard either, but it's not Ticket to Ride. Well, again, if I am with some even mildly seasoned board gamers, then I see no reason for me to play Fantahzee over Elder Sign. This could be, again, a gateway board game towards thematic board gaming, but it really doesn't show how mechanics can portray a theme in any meaningful and captivating way. If you only play with people that play Yahtzee, then here there is another angle. But I don't even know that really there is that much of an advantage here, because the game, as I said, still feels feels bland. That is the problem. There is something, but not enough to really captivate me. The mechanics are solid, but they are solid in many other games that use the same mechanics. So I just don't see any really quality that makes this game stand out, that makes the combination of Yahtzee mechanics and fantasy theme special or exciting in any particular way. Also, the decision tree, that is the word, is pretty obvious. You don't really have tough decisions. The ones that they showed, you have 8 points. Should I spend them all, or should I waste some to get a powerful card? Well, there are several considerations there, but none that really amounts to anything tough, to really anything deep. If a card is towards the town, then of course you want to privilege it, but then simply you look at the cards that are there and you look at the number of victory points that they give you. You may take counterattacks into account if you really want to save some of your heroes, but usually victory points is what you're going for. That is to say, it feels really abstract in the fact that you're simply piling up your heroes, getting a numerical total, and then you spread among the monsters, and it really doesn't create any tough decision that really makes the game, I wouldn't say gripping. There's not a dungeon crawler, but a little more interesting. There is something a little bland about this game that prevented me from being too excited about it. I hoped I would like it more, because again, I like Elder Sign, I like other games that have simple roll and re-roll mechanic and a little bit of theme. This one is not one of them, so I found it a little bland, a little meh. Some people may like it precisely because it is simple, linear, straightforward, and you can play with people that do not play complex game otherwise, but I'm not one of those people, and the game is just not one for me, I guess.